Thank you. Jameson, uh, Jameson, thank you. That does make a difference. All right. I'm starting over again. I'm 68. I'm trying to keep up with this technology, and I'm not that good at it. But I'm keeping up all right. All right. Anyway, so I wanted to say at the beginning, welcome. Thank you for coming to this. I'm Jeremy Sherman. And I will at some point figure out a way to transfer all of this off of YouTube to where we can have a real conversation, just talk to each other. I'd like that. Let me fix the screen thing here and let me hear if anybody's got any comments, critique, questions, anything you want to talk about. Um, I'm open to talk about anything. I wrote something fun this morning. I like to get up. Usually, when I get up in the morning, I'm playing with, and I had a nice one this morning. Let's see. So I'm going to see if I can find it here, uh, and if I do, then actually I know where to find it. Here we go. Sorry. It's called This Dumb Design. You know what pisses me off? What goes around doesn't come around. Why couldn't whoever designed this place have made it so if you do something bad, it costs you, and if you do something good, it pays? Automatic natural rewards for doing the right things, automatic natural punishments for doing the wrong things. You do bad, you get cancer. You do good, you win the lottery. Nature delivering good and bad luck on time, so we learn from it. Nothing personal or arbitrary. Good luck to good people, bad luck to bad people. That would keep us in line. That would keep crime from paying and murdering dictators from living long, happy lives in cushy palaces. Justice should be automatic. Instead, we have to try to make things right manually. It's exhausting, and we're terrible at it. Sloppy, spotty, impotent, biased. We get into bloody fights over who's good and bad when really it shouldn't be up to us. It should be up to some independent ref with no skin in the game, some universal super judge that knows good from bad and would be consistent, efficient, and inescapable, delivering the rewards and punishments. If we felt immediate direct consequences for our actions, we'd get our shit together lickety split. What do we do instead? We got dreamers pretending that that's what we've got, some all-powerful judge who sides with them about what's good and bad. And since there's no evidence we've got that, they have to pretend that the judge postpones consequences to some unknowable afterlife, which is as effective as getting people to it's as effective at getting people to straighten up as punishing a dog in the evening for peeing on the carpet in the morning. You got well-paid criminals rising to the top while pretending crime doesn't pay, punishing the good people. And you got these endless wars, good and bad people killing each other over what's good and bad, like they know. It's stupid. So it's long been of interest to me that issue. I think it probably came to me first hearing a theologian say, if there were a God, if heaven and hell are the least God could do to straighten out the injustices of this world. And I thought that was an interesting line. And so anyway, this will soon be a minor motion picture. Anybody got any questions? Anybody got any thoughts, critiques, propositions proposed? Any ideas you want to play with? There's a question that has come up a few times in the past. What do I recommend? I am. I read. I read by audio. It's been a long time since I sat down and read a book. I speed listen to books at about 101.5 to 200 to 2 times the normal speed, because they have to read these books slowly when they record them, or else they make too many mistakes and have to make too many edits. But I also read at that speed. Great. Okay, so Grandma Cherry, yes, we can talk about my opium. Let me just, I'll cap this for now by saying I read so broadly that it would be useful if you suggested, if anybody wants to know what I've been reading and what I like that I've read lately, pick some topic in particular that you want to think more about. Let me know what your interest is. Yeah, we can talk more about myopium. Uh, so we know what opium is, and we know that it is uh, an external version of an internal drug. That is, we have all of these um, chemicals floating around in our body causing us different responses. And for example, that morphine is a synthetic endorphin. Um, and so myopium is a term I coined for the pain-killing effects of short-sightedness. Um, and I was friends with Ram Dass. He happened to live locally, and a friend introduced me, and he's the guy who came up with the "be here now" argument. Um, and he was quite proud of it. It was quite successful, and it was a useful contribution in its own way. I just don't think that being here now is um, the be all and end all. We have a tendency across all of our research and explorations towards what I call insight overreach. You get some idea, it's useful, and then you think it covers everything. So be here now is a little bit like that. But be here now is, among other things, a kind of a painkiller. I remember when I needed the most to be here now, the moment when I was the most enthusiastic about meditation and all of that was when I was in pain about my past and in pain about my future. So I needed my opium. I needed the pain-killing effect of short-sightedness. Now, my research colleague, this guy Terrence Deacon, who I've been working with for close to 30 years, who's way more credentialed than in a way, I have been borrowing off of him. We've been good friends and colleagues and collaborators for so long. He's encyclopedic. He's a neuroscientist. He was at Harvard. He moved to Berkeley, full tenured professor. But he he's been easy to talk with about all this stuff. So a lot of what I'm giving you is under the influence of having jammed with him for 30 years, close to 30 years. Okay, so so I just want to get to the end about the myopium. Uh, we are interested. He is currently writing a book called Falling Up. And he's talking about um, addiction, in effect, and how we have to use it to understand how complexity emerges. How, for example, we became multicellular, or how society works. We talk about it as altruism, sacrifice, but the evidence is increasing that that we end up addicted because if we find an external source of something like an opium, uh, we stop producing it ourselves and thus become in effect dependent upon it. So a lot of what holds society together, what holds my body together, is my multicellular body is that the parts are now addicted. The parts cannot stand on their own. So there's another connection to myopium, is that actually I think of, I've written about this, I've got some videos about it. It's really important. I would say it's the missing half of Darwinism, which is that when you have a secondary source, a secondary way to produce something, you lose the capacity to produce it, and then you become codependent in a good way or a bad way. It doesn't matter. Either way, it's the same process. Okay, I'm going to take a look a little further on here. I have crippling anxiety about the election, and it's after my fear they were heading towards perilous. Okay. Thank you, Fred. I got this in a video interview the other day. I am post angst and outrage, and I've been trying to be that way for a long time. I guess it's in a way lucky for me because I don't fear the consequences. If it was cancer that I was dealing with and didn't know whether I could survive it or not, that'd be more visceral. I am trying to be hands on deck. I'm trying to be as analytic and clear thinking as I can be. I don't want to be hand wringing about the election. I don't want to be angry and upset. I'm trying to figure out what's the most I can do with what I'm dealt to increase the chances that the election will come out well. I do follow the polls and all of that. I will definitely be doing get out the vote work. I'm doing a lot of video making. I think that in general, my way of dealing with crippling anxiety is to fucking do something. Just it has been therapeutic when I've been in a stress place. I go out and do something related to the stress. My dad died of cancer at 59. Before that, he was working. He was working to deal with this cancer, and he meditated, not because he thought it was going to actually help his cancer. He described it as a votive act. It's an act you take in order to weigh in. It's your expression of your commitment to it. So having something to do about the election has been helpful for me. I mean, obviously, I've got this therapeutic outlet in the making of videos. And I'm also concerned, obviously, there's a problem with these therapeutic outlets, is that we often do things that are actually not making a difference to anything but our own crippling anxiety. So, there's a lot of gesture activism. And it can become a problem. Some people are talking about it. Okay, so now, there's another thing worth keeping in mind. I like what Obama said, which is it's not the end of the world till the end of the world. And I also know that I am ill prepared for what it would be like if Trump came into power. I don't think it's easy for us Americans to imagine it. Sinclair Lewis wrote a book called "It Can't Happen Here," which nails exactly what's happening here. I think it's Sinclair Lewis. Worth reading. Okay, on your other channel about free will 7 years ago, this is Michael De Sosa. Hi, Michael, I remember you. Your will to live, yes. Yes, okay. Could you go over these 4 concepts? Oh, good. Okay, so have the will to live, will to learn, will to think. Yeah. I don't know if it's 4 concepts. And I did just regenerate that. I rewrote that 4-part series on free will versus determinism. It's listed as part 2 of irony as your superpower, which I hope people recognize. I didn't immediately, is an ironic statement because actually irony is about how we don't have superpowers. I mean, we have powers, but we don't have, but there's no magic bullet kind of thing. Anyway, part 2 of that is how I would address that, but it doesn't get to what you're talking about, Michael, which would be distinguishing the ways in which our modes of being. Okay, so one thing I have in common with all critters, including plants and bacteria and all that, is my struggle for existence. I have to work all day and night to prevent myself from degenerating, which means I have to protect myself against degeneration, and I have to regenerate what degenerates. So that is what you could call it vegetative sentience. That's what Terry calls it. I don't like the term sentience there because it's not a feeling thing. That is, a plant, I don't assume that plants or bacteria feel or think anything, but they do struggle for their own existence. They don't struggle to learn how to adapt or how to do better. They accumulate habits or adaptations that enable them to struggle more efficiently, if that's possible. Okay, and they do interpret. They are interpreting. We have to start to make a distinction between cause and effect, physical phenomena, and means to ends interpretation. And the sciences just barely touch on that. It's just surprising how far you can get in science without actually paying attention to that huge difference. As I say over and over in my book and elsewhere, a stop sign doesn't cause you to stop unless you crash into it. Rather, we interpret it as about stopping. It's all strictly physical behavior, what goes on when we interpret something, but its suites of behavior, its whole populations of molecules, atoms, photons, all of that. And it's a radically different thing that is exclusive to organisms struggling for their own existence, like the vegetative sentience I was just talking about. A plant interprets, a tree interprets sunlight, all of that nutrients. It's doing it without any feelings or conscious or thoughts. Okay, then you and they are habit accumulating. That's what all life is, and I've got that going on too. Just to illustrate, I always use this example. Today, you will generate 330 billion replacement cells. Um, you have to do that because you're degenerating. This is another thing that is overlooked in most work on free will and determinism, and across consciousness studies. I mean, across biology. That we don't pay attention to the fact that what is universal to every environment that any organism ever could live in is that things fall apart, that the second law of thermodynamics is operative. And it's not just thermodynamics, it's not just about energy. If you've got a sorted system, a regularized system, and there's motion, and there always is, there's Brownian motion and everything else, then it will become randomized. That's what's true. And I don't want to be randomized too soon. I don't actually ever want to be randomized, which is probably one of the reasons why me and the rest of humans have an aversion to thinking about the fact that we are degenerating all the time. I had to look up the term for it. It's cephalophobia, is fear of decay. I think we got it's just amazing to me. It took until 170 years ago for us to figure out that everything is falling apart, and that we have to work against our tendency to fall apart. Why did it take so long? Can you imagine going straight through the Middle Ages, or any peasant population anywhere in the world where decay is everywhere? And you still don't notice that the natural tendency is towards decay. Anyway, so keeping that in mind, first level, the most basic universal level is everybody's struggle for existence, the will to live. And it's not like, yeah, I'm willing, it's willpower. And so that's what Terry's work has been about and what I've been presenting here and there. Okay. Then you've got neuronal sentience, a kind of subjective sentience, which we've known for a long time has all sorts of influences. This is a big point to Freud. That there's a tension between what feels good to us and what is good for us in the long run. But in a way, what feels good to us is a representative of what's good for us in the long run. Anyway, we are neuronal creatures, and we have a different kind of memory system on top of the other system. So it's not just stacked like layers like this. It's what we call strange loops, though Terry and I look for better terms for it. A strange loop is where it's basically the chicken and egg stuff. So I have a chicken and egg relationship between my unfelt will to live, my somatic sentience, my vegetative sentience, and my feelings. And then on top of, and so animals are habit seeking, they can learn. And then you get to the symbolic species, human beings. The machine. I like your line there. Okay. That's what I'm trying to get at. Yes, but we can also talk the conservatives. And the first thing I would say about the conservatives is that they're not conservative. I mean, that's certainly not the strange. That's not their strongest power, is their conservativeness. Anyway, sorry. So language radically changes things. It makes us almost a different kingdom of creatures, human beings. It's astonishing how much it changes us. And it's also astonishing how little attention it gets from anthropologists and biologists, that we work with symbols. And symbols are a different kind of thing. So, for example, if I say the word, okay, we live in a society where the convention is that sound is consistent. It's a range of sounds because I could say word, 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 all sorts of accents and all that. But there's an approximation that rounds down to the word, word. And we have references for what word means. And then we can string that stuff together and we can imagine anything and we can talk about anything. And it's not just for communication. Language is how we think. If imagine what it would be like to think without language. You actually can't do it. But if you could, one thing you'd notice is that Gregor Samsa would actually have it easy if he was turned into a bug in Kafka's Metamorphosis. The bug would have a hell of a time. If it suddenly woke up to consciousness of the whole wide world and everything possible within it. So I would argue one thing that this third level of interpretive competence is for us human beings is it's a shitstorm. I describe it as trudging through a sandstorm of mojo eroding possibilities, all the things that could trip us up. So if vegetative sentience, if plants are habit accumulating over time, over generations, and organisms with neuronal systems, in particular brains, uh, are habit seeking, they can learn. We are habit jonesing. Humans are habit jonesing. We can't turn things into habit fast enough. We want our interpretations to become as automatic as possible. And that's also a complication. And in a way, it does bring us right around to the conservatives, because what you're getting from them is a lockdown on is the one interpretation. And to make it stick, they have to make it vague as hell. I mean, you never hear what Trump's plan is. You just hear Trump justifying everything he does because he's got a vision. No one talks about the vision. You wouldn't want to get specific about it, but what you get is the habit becomes so addictive because it solves everything for you. You don't have to deal with any doubts. Doubts are painful. Doubts are what rise to consciousness. Doubts are what we try to resolve. We habit jonesing humans, craving, I don't want to be doubting this anymore. The anxiety that someone that yeah, the anxiety that Fred expressed. Um, we don't like that state. It's like a rash on our skin. It's extremely painful. So God grant me, or whoever grant me, some way to resolve this, so I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to wonder what to do. Would be a very natural tendency for humans, especially now. Just think of what a clusterfuck we're in now. I mean, it's just astonishing. Those of us who lived in college when computers came out, I'm so far back that I was in college in 1975 when University of California at Santa Cruz had one computer. It was gigantic. Someone mentioned on the last day of class that someday people might even end up with computers at home. So I've been here for the entire brainchild population explosion, and it's a thrill, but it's also scary as hell because it's just too much world and you can't factor it all in. So yes, we are habit jonesing. Let's see. Michael, thank you for saying that. This is great. These ideas are all connected. This is the point. This is the game I'm playing. And I got to tell you, I could be full of shit. You cannot play in science and philosophy without a very high likelihood that you will have spent your entire life barking up the wrong tree. So I'm not just speaking to that, but what I am trying to do is have a real, continuous, ontogenetic explanation for what we are. By ontogenetic, I mean explaining how, that is the genesis or the genealogy, not to do with genes, Genes in this context. They have a place in this story, but they are not. It's not like they are the automatic. They're not our souls, but an explanation for how we are from cradle to grave, and from the origins of this interpretive sentience that you get with the simplest organisms through the entire evolution of to us, and why we'd be in a shitstorm right now. Why any species that gained the power of language and technology anywhere in the universe would be in this predicament we're in. And a lot of it has to do with the power to accumulate unrealistic habits. You'll notice so this is an important part of this work. This is an important part of this work. With the first organisms, the first struggle for existence from our perspective is in what we see as an organism that doesn't have a record keeping template like DNA. That is, you need functionality first. You need a functioning struggle for existence before you'd ever evolve something as complex as a system for reading a code off of DNA. Okay, so we call that a displacement. There's a displacement from, we actually see it as going backwards. You start with functional proteins within a living being, and I've described that, what we call an autogen in many places. But I have a book about it. Terry has a book about it. I can explain what that is. But once you've got that, you might accumulate the capacity to keep a template of it. Then you have the neuronal template for it. And then you have the symbolic template for it. Each of these is a step displaced from the real world. So, for example, I have a few research colleagues who think that life starts with yuck and yum, and in a way, it does. It starts with do and don't, but I don't think that the simplest organism actually felt anything. So now we get feelings, and they're slightly displaced from reality. They're a proxy for it, but this was Freud's point about it, which is they can be way off. So, for example, yeah, eating nutritious food is good for you, and it tastes better than no food, but empty calories or bad food or heroin feels even better and it's worse for you. There's a displacement there. We're one step removed from reality. And then with language, we become many steps removed from reality. And so that's where it becomes challenging. In fact, I have many friends. You can imagine I look like a hippie, and I hung with hippies. I went to my reunion of my commune last weekend. That was fun. The farm in Tennessee. Uh, uh, they have a reunion out here. Anyway, uh, I have many friends who are opposed to capitalism, and I get it. I see why. But I also think there's this big difference that capitalism, in a way, if we're talking about competition and cooperation for limited resources, that's been here since the beginning of life. Okay. Uh, and So that's always been here. What's different is that it's been radically displaced by the fact that we're a symbolic species. So all organisms compete. It's a bloody unfair world. That's what that original essay of the morning was about, this dumb design. If I were in charge of the world, I'd make it fair, that kind of thing. But what's different is that we are now doing it very displaced. That is, Elon detached from reality and only accumulating a symbolic representation of status. You don't get that from organisms. You don't get that from other organisms. That is, an animal's not going to just amass resources so they can be a legend in their own mind and feel like a badass. They might do it to get to be the alpha male, but that's even different. Animals are a bit more grounded in the world than we are. Okay, uh, let's see. Um, okay, okay. Anyone think about pink elephant? Yes, exactly. I'm just going back a little ways here. Um, let's see, here's something from the machine. He's appealing to how human brains don't work out logical reasoning. Brains just write narratives to make the universe coherent. You can just seed an emotion and the brain will connect to any story. That's the point. We're in agreement there, the machine. Um, it's uh, it's it's just easier to play God than be human. And I think this is I think a blind spot in cult studies, in narcissism studies. We don't talk about how wonderfully appealing and attractive it is to fall in, and how easy it is to fall into assholia, the land where you get to pretend you're God. It's just so attractive, and we don't admit it to ourselves. I think part of that is a vocational hazard of a lot of people who work on the narcissism thing, or the cult thing. I've seen it in action. These are people who were taken in at one time, and they don't necessarily want to see their own part in it. How attractive it is to fall in to narcissism or fall in with narcissists. Um, yeah. I should, Michael, let me say also, uh, Dan Ellsberg, the guy who founded behavioral economics and did all the Pentagon Papers and all that sort of stuff. I was lucky. He was a family friend, and then he and I became really good friends and we saw each other all the time. He lived in the neighborhood. We'd get together once a month for lunch. When I said it's a lot easier to play God than be human, he said, no, playing God is human. And is what it's like to be human, for what that's worth. And I think he's right that there is something. So when we talk about this, is the heart of irony, these strange loops where if you fold something back in on itself, chicken and egg, then you'll end up with these complications. That's the theme I'm working in this new series, the series called Irony as Your Superpower. I'm working on exactly that. For example, if I said I hate haters, which proves I don't hate. That kind of circularity. Why I wear the hat with the hats on it. That kind of thing. Okay. Um, so let's see. Does Terry have a proposal for what the molecular chemical structure of the autogen is? Uh, yes. Um, and no. We don't have specific molecules in mind for it yet. We have a few chemists and computational chemists who have shown some interest in trying to specify what they are. But what? But yes, in that. So just for the record, autogen is our model for patient zero. The first, you could say, the missing link between inanimate and animate chemistry, between non-living and living chemistry. It would be the first self making functional interpretive effort. Um, all of those aspects of it have to be there. And the way I think of it is it's got to be a circularity where it does work it's chemistry that does work to keep the chemistry, the chemical structure, the dynamic structure going in its workspace. So work that works is effort that functions. It's good for keeping a chemical system going. Um, uh, Within its workspace is interpretation. So chemical system going is a being, a living being, which is busy being a being, the way that we will each produce our 330 billion new cells today. So we're very fussy about the structure, but we aren't paying much attention so far to the particular molecules. I was talking with Terry about this yesterday. We're trying to explain self-regenerative chemistry. That it has implications for life is important and a source of interest. But what we're really trying to understand is how you could ever get chemistry that regenerates its own dynamic structure, which is what we do. We're not a static structure, and we're not made of stuff. We're made through stuff that keeps on passing through us, including the 60% water. Um, and uh, yet we our structure within a viable range. And we've been doing that continuously for 3.6 to 8 billion years. How does that happen? Now, it is also, I mean, I often introduce it as trying to explain the origins of life because that's a first pass, but we aren't actually, we're interested, I could say, more fundamentally in how you would actually explain uh, that kind of self-regeneration and what it would entail. It would entail interpretation. It's not a molecule being, it's not a molecule that copies or gets bounced around like a billiard ball. It's got to be a chemical configuration, a system where stuff passes through. Okay, all right. So let's see. Yes, as Dana Power says, we are the ship of Theseus, and yet we're the ship of Theseus that rebuilds itself. And that's a huge difference. I mean, you could say, you know, the cars in Cuba, which they've had to repair them over and over. Yeah, they're the ship of Theseus, but they're doing nothing to regenerate themselves. I'm busy regenerating myself. You're busy regenerating yourself. It makes a huge difference, also overlooked to a remarkable degree. We are like machines in that we constrain what happens, we limit what passes through us, and we produce functional functional work for ourselves, like a cell does. But the difference is that we're doing it for ourselves, and we're doing it by regenerating our own parts in real time, all the time, because our parts are really fragile. Um, and because there was no maker who formed us and is in the repair business other than doctors, and that like. Okay, let's see. We want to play God instead of being human. Who or whoa is used as a name? Interesting. Global Solidarity says who or whoa, which sounds like Al Pacino, is used to name as a name for God. Okay, where are we? Let's see. Anything? Someone bring up something. Someone tell me where I'm wrong. Jeremy, you ignorant slut. I hope you guys remember that from the early Saturday Night Live. Strange loops. Okay, Michael, you said strange loops is a great phrase for this. I don't think so. I mean, I'm glad to have it. It was coined by Douglas Hofstadter, who was very interested in that's right. He was talking about women. Hey, Mike. Hey, Mick. It's good to see you. Let's see. So, oh, jeez. Strange Loops was coined by Douglas Hofstadter. He wrote a book called I Am a Strange Loop. He doesn't pay attention in that book to the difference between a strange loop like the ship of Theseus and the strange loop that we are. That is, a ship of Theseus is only a strange loop if there are people who keep on repairing it outside it. We are doing that internally. We are a system that of checks and balances that keeps regenerating the system of checks and balances. But strange loop was a term coined by him. Terry and I spend like half our time fussing over the language and the baggage it carries. Strange is an epistemological argument. It's strange to us. We're actually talking about something that's not strange at all. The only reason we think it's strange is because it's strange to us. You know, you're trying to avoid circularity in math, in logic, in Excel, Microsoft Excel, because that stuff is a problem. But it's not a problem in real life. It's actually the solution in real life at the most fundamental level. Yes, it can be a problem, like if you're going around in circles in an argument or a debate or a fight or in Israel and Palestine, good Lord. That's you could say it's a strange loop, a tit for tat kind of problem that runs out on and on ad nauseum. But what are they really? These strange loops. What are they ontologically? Not just, hey, this feels strange to me that the chicken and egg come, you can't tell who started it, or that they each cause each other. The term okay, I've got two terms for it. One is loopholes, spelled with a W within the parentheses. So with Terry, we call it a hologenic constraint. That's what the living uh, self is. It's a hologenic, that is, it's creating, it's generating a whole. It's in the autogen, it's actually a chain reaction that happens to produces a byproduct, these molecules that tend to form shells. And so you get a chain reaction happening in the place where some of the chain reaction gets captured inside and dormant inside of a cell, inside of a shell. And then if the shell breaks open in the presence of more reactants, the chain reaction can resume. Super simple model. We got some animations of it and all of that. Okay, so what is that? That is a hologenic constraint. Why is it a constraint? It's not the chemicals involved, it's the way in which it prevents itself from ending. The two processes prevent each other from ending. The chain reaction keeps on generating the molecules that make the shell, because otherwise the molecules that would make the shells would break. When the shell breaks, they would break and dissipate. So it's preventing the shell making process from ending, and the shell making process is actually stopping cold some of the chain reaction by encapsulating it inside of dormant molecules. And notice, if the number one challenge for life is how to keep itself from degenerating, it's not, though I am constantly regenerating myself, the simplest life form probably wouldn't. It would need a dormant seed phase. And this is what's missing from most of the other models, is a sense that you actually need to protect against degeneration for a while. So I'm saying this would have come about by accident. Okay, so strange loop, hologenic constraint, loopholes, which is that it's a loophole whereby something can be perpetuated, prevented from ending. That is a loophole on the second law, which is a product of the whole. And the whole, realized that I had an old term that I used for something else that actually made a good term for what these actually are. It's a both antagonism. That is, the two parts are keeping each other from their spontaneous tendencies. So it's both and they are both in the prevention business. You can think of it much like a marriage. A marriage keeps both parties, a healthy marriage keeps both parties off the street. They both get in the example. They both are checks and balances on each other. Okay, let me see. I'm trying to catch up here. All right. In the severe darkness of deep treatment resistant depression, it feels that I'm no longer. John, we could talk sometime. That's probably not for online here. If you felt like it, email me. What an example of how cause and effect are used to explain away purpose. Great question, Mick. We I mean, there are so many versions of it. One version of it is that DNA, all you need is DNA replicating. And there's cause and effect. And as a result, there is no purpose in life. It's just these chemical systems. I mean, you get Richard Dawkins almost goes there. Anybody who goes there does it by equivocation. They get slippery because they're basically telling you choose determinism, or I am advocating that no one advocates, or convince yourself. You can try to convince yourself that you're a self, but you're not a self and you're not trying. It was called the user illusion at one time, the false impression that you are a person who uses things. Dan Dennett described that idea, the idea of a self that is trying to do things. He described it as a figment, to which we say to this prestigious philosopher, a figment of fucking whom? You can't have a figment without someone who misinterprets. So there are lots of versions of it. I'm working on a piece right now about the way in which language makes it really hard to see what's actually going on when we are informed. So, inform in science means two different things. One is that a form gets passed from one medium to another. So, for example, if I drop a coffee cup on the table um, and it makes a dent, that's form transferring positive, negative to the table. But I would not call that information, and yet scientists do. That's one way that they can talk about information. It's just simply pass a form passing from one medium to another, which always happens. It happens in any kind of chain reaction. It happens all the time. That's what physical work is form being passed from thing to thing. Okay. And so if you start with that, then you get to Shannon information theory, which is that everything is just bits and bytes, and it's just on and off toggles. And so you end up with this entire, what Terry refers to as the perfect storm, the varieties of ways in which we've discovered that we can imagine anything as being a symbolic token and just think of it as kind of work, so this switches that switch in the computer, but also effortless work in some strange way. Um, so that I mean, we're just really sloppy about this stuff, and I think we kind of like it that way. If someone said to me, Jeremy, your idea had an impact on me, that's using a material metaphor. This is a very big George Lakoff point, is that we keep on using physical metaphors. And the question for us is not, it doesn't mean that all our physical metaphors are wrong. There are some real and some, what they, you could say, impressionistic heuristics about how it works. Ideas do work on me, but how they do it isn't well explained. And so that's where this work that Terry and I and crew, by the way, I mean, people are invited to join this. We have a meeting every week, pretty much. People from all over the world, maybe 20, 30 people will show up, 20 more like these days. And Terry's been accessible a long time. I mean, if anybody wants in on that, get in touch with me. If anybody wants to hear where we're sitting there trying to work out this continuous no gaps explanation for what we are starting with chemistry, please let me know. How we can stop listening to leaders that can tell us status is that we look for and foster other types of human motivations, autonomous motivation. Okay. So this is Nils, and it's Nils. We've talked a little bit elsewhere, and I want to say something about the methodology that I'm employing here. That is how, habits make all sorts of. This is the problem. I'm slightly ADD, so I see these other comments. But anyway, I think here's a way to tie what Niels and Tom said together. I have a term, robo-envy, for the way we would like it to be that words would be like software programming creates new habits. This would be a convenient thing. Teachers learn very early on, if they're paying attention, that it doesn't work that way. That minds aren't buckets you drop stuff into and it stays there. They're sieves. Stuff falls through it. You have to say things many times, and it could be misinterpreted or interpreted in self-serving ways. All of that. So when Niels makes this argument, I hear something that I've done lots, and I know lots of people who do it, and don't do it anymore. I'm not interested in doing it anymore. I don't think it's the right way to go about it. You come up with these terms, positive terms. One was self-compassion. I think I got that one from Nils. Autonomous motivation, self-determination theory. These are words and they have positive connotations. They're kind of loosely defined. That is, and they're defined probably more with instances of them being positive than negative. Um, and you go out and you promote them, and uh, yeah, and then you promote them. But I think they have a tendency to become what I'm calling last words. That is, they are loaded. Uh, they are load bearing. That is, you can say, I'm someone who lives. I'm someone who is self compassionate, and you can feel good about yourself because you're self compassionate. Um, they are loosely defined, fine to be, especially positive or negative words. You know, like we don't know what woke means. We just know it's hella bad if you're a liberal, if you're a conservative, if you're MAGA, and it's hella good uh, if you're progressive. Um, and we, it, Nils, what I'm trying to get at is there's something about how morality, the life cycle of morality. You come up with a positive term or a term that you define as positive. Um, at best, it saturates society and soon becomes a cover for bad behavior. So I do have a project on my back burner. I have the assumption that no ideology, no prescription, there's none that can't be abused by assholes, by absolutists. I've never met one that hasn't, though I am interested in whether there's a way that one could produce a ironic ideology, one where the bedrock keeps pulling the rug out from under itself and doesn't get cynical about it, like like what I call the doctrine of foregone inconclusion, like who gives a shit? It's all nonsense anyway. No, if you could actually, I'm interested in whether you could asshole proof an ideology. Um, I don't bet so. How much fun it is to say I think the answers on how we can do X or how we can stop the bad. I know how much fun it is to feel like you have found the way to address it. I'm trying to address it, but I'm mostly trying to address it by describing what we really are. Um, and reckoning with that rather than what I call, if I were in charge of the world, this is what I would do. Um, yeah, banning religion. Yeah, it just. I've seen too many revolutions. I've read too many studies of them. Yes, ego adjacency. That's closer to where I'm going. Which is, if we could all just admit how tempted we are to do this stuff. For example, I say to religious people, "I'm an atheist, but don't get me wrong. I'm as delusional as the next guy. I just don't play it out there. I don't play it out in religion. I have other delusions of grandeur, you know. So it's something about being ego adjacent and admitting it. Um, yes, okay, Mick. So you're reading one. Uh, boy, I am ADD, or I'm trying to juggle. Anyway, let's yes. Do I have any recommendations on books, websites to guide me into understanding language and metaphors? Well, you've got one in hand, Mick. Mick is a wonderful ally, new ally in this work. Um, uh, and so, yeah, I mean, if you can stand it, the book Gödel, Escher, Bach by Hofstadter is a masterpiece on that front. I can also send you some. I'll have to think about which books I would really recommend on it. Hofstadter's deep into metaphors, and he's also, after that first book, Gödel, Escher, Bach, which won him a Pulitzer. I find him shockingly wordy. I mean, just I can't believe it. I got through one of his 500-page books, and I think, man, you've been hammering the same damn point for this whole thing. But he's kind of fun to read too. He's an easy read that way, but not necessarily Gödel, Escher, Bach. That takes a little study. Marcy, great to see you here, or I wish I saw you all here. I'm going to work that out somehow so we can actually have this as a conversation. It depends on what audiobooks you what you're really interested in thinking about. I will qualify my conversation with more books about politics and general human. Oh, okay. Um, Dang, I read so many of them. Marcy, everybody, I hope you guys know my email. Um, yeah, there's my email. Email me if you exactly, Gamma, you're right. Squirrel. Um, but yes, email me if you've got questions about recommended books, and in some cases, I'll also be able to give you uh, to actually send them to you. So these days, I get them off of Audible, where I've got something like 600 books that I've read. Uh, but over the years, I've also been doing it all by where I get the text and turn it into audio, and there are plenty of easy ways to do that lately. So I have some rarer books that I find fabulous. And I tend to just swoon over some of the stuff. I tend to either read a little bit and decide, now this isn't for me. I tend to swoon over a book, and then it becomes part of the mush that is my mind. Um, if you haven't read Ernest Becker's The Denial of Death, that's often a handy one. Um, I find it useful. A good, interesting, easy, non-academic read that deals with this fundamental aspect of the human condition that is a result of us having language, is that we are the only creatures who can foresee our own deaths, and therefore we struggle with what I would frame as kind of a fun. How do I throw all in knowing I'm going to be thrown out? How do I invest in life knowing that I will have to divest? It's no other critter, I don't think, is dealing with anything like that. And one of the arguments I've made to the Becker in the Becker conversation is that it's not just death; it's just the little deaths of every day. How do you deal with setbacks that remind you of your own somnipotence, your own limitations, that you only got some power? How do you deal with that? And Becker argues that we deal with it largely by claiming immortality projects. That is, we claim that there's something we stand for that's greater than us, and in some cases will grant us eternal life. Um, Not in my case, though. I'm only here once, but I have good news, which is I'm never going to die, because I'm an exception. On hold through my life. Yes, audio. Good idea. No, I found it very moving. It was a way of coming to terms, basically relaxing into the non-relaxing aspect of life. It's it just it's really hard, and it's really hard to be human. I wish we appreciated it more. That's where I link up with Nils's thing about self-compassion. It's not compassion for me; it's compassion for all of us. This is this is quite the clusterfuck we're in, we humans. And I just wish that I wish that we could honor that more and relax into the practical joke of it. It's a practical joke that's not played by anyone on us. It's just that it's like born identity. You land here, you have no idea what you are, you have no idea what you're meant for. You got to scramble to figure it out in a world that's extremely confusing, and that's all kind of laughable and yet terrifying. I mean, I'm not. I'm trying to live in this tragic comedy of being human, um, and try not to get too glib about it or too hand wringy. Okay, let's see. Oh, Grandma, you found me through John Attack. I just did this interview this last week with him. Someone said we went on too many tangents, and it's possible. And we also kind of we talked past each other a little bit, but we'll get better at that. Okay, let that. We're almost done. Um, yes, yes, yes. Don't panic. It's organic, and panic because it's organic, and it's you know, I'm trying to get to that place. All right. Um, All right, let's see if there's anything else, and then otherwise we're going to do this in 2 weeks again. If anybody, feel free to email me. I communicate better that way than I do. I'm just getting around to figuring out how to comment in response to comments. That is, to get in the habit of doing it. I'm very active on Facebook. I'm very responsive on email. As long as you don't get, as long as you stay succinct and give me something easy to manage. I'm trying to write as many of these videos as possible. Yes, irony makes me laugh and it makes me cry. Uh, and I love some tangents and not others. I'd like to hear your thoughts about relational frame theory and how we can incorporate irony into the. Okay, thank you, Digit Hand. You know what? I don't know relational frame theory that by that name, so I will go and look it up, and we can talk about it sometime soon. Feel free to email me. If you're not a Facebook friend, feel free to become a Facebook friend, because that's where I put out bumper stickers, all like 10 to 15 word things, often with a edge of humor on them, some irony, but all of it relevant. And we have conversations there on Facebook. Okay. Thank you for wondering with me. And I want to be able to wonder more directly. So I'm going to have to figure that out. Jeremy for mayor. Not going to happen. Let's see. Okay. There we go. Gödel Etherbach. Okay. Yoish. Thank you, brothers. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Until next time.